Welcome back to the big interviews at TheBigScope. So today on the show we've got somebody who once ran away from her father's ancestral home. Today she is an investor, an entrepreneur, and she is the co-chair of NASSCOM's Product Council. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to bring on the show Dr. Somnath Singh.
Thank you so much, guys. It's an honor to be on your show.
So, even before we go into so many multiple roles that you have, from traveling to countries, fetching deals,
right.
How did all these start? And is it true, the rumor, the fact that you ran away from your dad's home way back so many years back, and then you came to Bangalore with what, 2,000 rupees in your pocket, and you didn't talk to your dad for 16, 17 years?
No, not 16. I'm not that old. well, that's like, I know, 3 years to be precise.
What made you do that? What made you do that? Pursue your dreams like that?
Well, I have a lot to thank my parents for it. While on one side, it is true that coming from a Bengali Brahmin family with, a legacy of doctors and scientists, it's not easy to sell your dream and saying that, I want to be in management and an economist, and they would be like, management is equal to sales, equal to going door to door, trying to sell sabun, never getting sold and so on. So, but one thing which I saw always my parents doing when they were even at the dining table talking to each other is debating ideas and saying, you know what, it's okay to be rational sometimes, it's okay to not be practical sometimes, and it's only when you're a little impractical and a little irrational, which is so-called taboo in the society, is when the best of you comes out. So yes, it's true, I ran away. I came with just 2,000 rupees in my pocket, and I did 3 jobs. Besides studying in my college, I used to stitch clothes. I used to make homemade chocolates, which I would sell at my college. My friends could afford having boyfriends, and I could just afford selling them something nice which would please their boyfriends. And I even used to sit in a salon trying to sell services, because when you need to survive, everything is doable.
That's an interesting point you make. I was just asking, where do you get the skills to make chocolates and stitch clothes and work at a salon while also working at college?
Right.
See, fashion designing is a very profiled and very fancy word for a simple job, which is tailoring.
Right.
When you add creativity to skill, it becomes design and sense of a sense of a business, right? So your creativity and your skill is what makes you exceptional. So I learned these from them, because that time when I left home, Dad would not give me any money, and I had to survive, and I learned to stitch my own clothes. When I did that, I figured, you know what, we could take orders for all our PG mates. Instead of them going and buying somewhere else, let the orders come to us and we would share the revenue. That's how it happened. Sitting at the salon, see, one thing which I knew I was always good at was I was very articulate and very good at selling things. So even in school you discover, see, that's a process of self-discovery, winning debates, being very eloquent and all. So I already knew I was good at that. I'm very good with people. So when the PG auntie, who is by the way one of my biggest inspiration, she single-handedly run her family. Today she has a multi-crore empire doing 10 different things. And she's a simple Sindhi lady who got married in a family of lawyers, but she became the champion of the family. So that reminded me that being a champion has got nothing to do with gender.
Right.
Being exceptional has got nothing to do with gender. Being in helm of what you do has got nothing to do with gender. It only needs an attitude.
How do these things transit into your current role? I mean, you're the co-chair at the NASSCOM Product Council, and you also have your own startup. I mean, it's not fair to call that a startup anymore. It's been there for
Three of them. 3 companies now.
Okay, so 3 companies. And how does all these qualities transit into what you're doing now? Because these are big roles.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right. So,
firstly, I think when somebody gets into a role, it feels like you're filling in a big shoe. It's something which is very coveted, but I think it's all about action, right? So, see, I have 3 companies now. What started with one, Unspun, which was technology services, and we realized very quickly that technology and services require training, because to be able to provide real value to your clients, you need to upskill them.
Right.
You cannot join a job with one skill and stay there with the same skill for the rest of your life. That's what leads to an unemployment. So people make a huge human cry saying, I'm losing my job. It's because you stayed in it too long and did nothing about it. So we realized very quickly, working with our clients, we need to start training as a function. And what started with training our clients became an educational institution called Digital Leadership Institute, which today works with colleges, creating curriculum in digital web technology, social technology, digital communications, which is getting embedded into their curriculum, which is like, a proper UGC curriculum of like 120-hour course. So it's getting embedded in that. And imagine what started with training a client, transcended into becoming a full portfolio of offerings, which we now are offering to colleges. We're even the first ever who started training rural students, which is going to Ramakrishna Mission, going to government schools and colleges, disrupting digital with the idea that, hey, digital is not just about, in English trying to decode something, but it can be done in local language. And India with 120 dialects needs the power of local language to really communicate to the end user, right? Even now your internet economy is pretty much urban and it's not rural penetrating. So you need to make that happen. So we started training people in local language, in Bengali, in Kannada, in Tamil. And today, those people are seated at where they are, in the comfort of their house, just using the power of internet and maybe a WebEx tool, training people across the world through Coursera, Manipal. There's so many. They've all signed up for this as trainers and they are now training. So if you really want to change, bring about change, it is about you learning from your experience, converting that into something which can lead to a larger set, reach out to a larger set of people and productizing it. So that became, Digital Leadership Institute. And the stitching clothes that I learned during my days in college and my penchant for fashion became IRA. IRA today is India's first design crowdsourcing platform. We got awarded as the most innovative manufacturer in 2017 by Times Group. We are allowing people from different walks of life who've never even gone to fashion school to contribute onto our platform, to submit their designs. Those designs get curated. We have tied up with mills. We use their spare capacity of machines to manufacture, so we're not even investing in machines. We're using the concept of collaboration, like conversion through collaboration, curation through collaboration. And imagine, so a mill that has 15-20 machines spare is now getting utilized through us, people like us. And then we're selling it through our offline stores. So we have a store in Koramangala, we're opening one in Kolkata and Mumbai shortly, and online. So we're on Amazon. Today, these women who never otherwise had an opportunity to earn an income, let me tell you, a lot of them come from Aurangabad, Raipur. I have a 45-year-old designer who's never gone to a design school, has 2 kids, contribute onto our platform and earn about 30 to 35,000 rupees through us per month.
Wow.
So we built a concept called loyalty through royalty. The more she sells, the more she makes. See, this is the only way you really uplift a nation, when you get people together to build something. So that's what. And you asked me, Aritra, a very beautiful question that as a co-chair of NASSCOM, NASSCOM happened to me in terms of, I was already working with NASSCOM, doing a lot of pro bono work as someone who's a mentor to startups, somebody who was working closely on developing curriculums and collaborating with startups, investing in a few of startups. And when Anspan became a member of NASSCOM, I was speaking at all possible NASSCOM events. So people already knew who I was as an individual. But when this opportunity came up, thanks to NASSCOM, I felt it was their way of telling me that it's your time to just come on a platform and contribute at a larger scale, which will create a legacy.
Do you think that has seen some amount of success? Because we talked about a lot. I mean, you said it all, Unikan. We have been a services nation for so long.
True.
Fair, there's nothing wrong in being a services nation. We're trying to discover how can we make it a make in India nation? How can we have software product companies, hardware product companies. If you tie that to what Prime Minister Modi said at the Davos summit, say 3 or 4 days ago, he talked about inward-looking policies should make way. Things like protectionism should make way
for globalization.
Compare that with what's been happening with the startup world in the last 1 year. I mean, without naming any particular startup, I mean, there's so many unicorns in India. Not so many. It's a couple of unicorns in India talked about. We need protectionism. So it's okay, but isn't that absolutely anti to what Prime Minister Modi said?
How do you balance the two? How do you balance Make in India, the startup culture, and the idea of being a leader in globalization now that America is stepping back?
Right. I think that's a wonderful question you guys posed, because if you actually think of it, they're all complementary to each other.
Okay.
I don't know whether you've taken a look at the recent procurement policy that the government of India has come forward with. MeToo was advocating and chairing that for a while. We said, when Prime Minister Modi said "Make in India," one of the questions everybody talked about was that how is Make in India possible if for the core government jobs, if for the most important RFPs and RFIs, the startups are not allowed to even champion and kind of be a part of it. So how you are going to keep making in India, but you're not going to create a consumer base for that. Are these Make in India products going to go and sell outside? No. We are a 1.2 billion populace. Other countries are looking at us as a market opportunity. Right. How do we develop our own market opportunity? So what MeitY did phenomenally well was come up with a procurement policy that said, if you're a startup, even a startup which is just 1-2 years old, it's okay for you to come and pitch for business. You have to be 50% Make in India. So which means the likes of Intel and Accenture and all, well, with all due respect, they have the right kind of skills and assets to support the kind of security, the kind of bandwidth that a government would require. But even the startups do. So how you can make that balance? You say now you can't be just an international company coming and pitching in. That's where the Make in India and the Made in India, the products that are actually happening, get a place to melange, to collaborate, right? Now you talked about the policies. Now, no great business have been able to grow without funding, okay. Right? Okay. Initially, about 20 years back, it was all institutional, right? The Tatas and the builders have not grown through VC funding. They have grown through private equity. They have grown through going public. They have grown through institutional fundings, that is banks and private institutions. Now, why did they feel like, okay, they can go and ask for these loans or these funding supports? Is because they had a business model which will scale and succeed. Now, what happens in the startup world is that sometimes you just become so skewed into thinking funding is the only validation, and because VCs just put in money without there's no interest to it. See, the moment you have interest to pay, you will earn revenue, right. Because you will not be able to pay. The moment you don't have any of these obligations, you're like, it's an attitude, chalta hai yaar, jab tak chalta hai, jab tak hai jaan, like it's like that. We'll make money eventually. Nahi bhi banayenge to chalega, dukaan band karenge jayenge, karega kya? So that attitude, I think, has to change, right? And therefore, globalization does not mean just an open market. Globalization means an ability to collaborate with a uniform model of working, not a capitalistic society, right? So to move away from that. So that in these three, if you see these three paradigms, they all kind of come together. But just allowing people to become investors or just allowing institutions to come and fund is not sufficient. Our taxation policies, our funding policies, our tech policies have to align.
I just want to actually go back to what you said a little bit earlier about how you don't like the word startup.
Yes, I don't.
So I think I can, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying entrepreneurs or working for yourself is the kind of people you're talking about, the people who need to be entrepreneurs in India.
Absolutely. I think it's like this. There are two kinds of self-employment model that is facilitated in all economies. One, where you work for yourself and earn an income. The other is where you become an employer. The second part can also be a phase two from the first part. So I'll just give you an example. A beautician that is going door to door today saying that I'm going to service you, does it on her own, makes enough revenue to say I'm going to start my own salon, because VCs don't fund her typically, right? It means not in the normal way of doing things. Yes, we have the YLGs of the world, but that's a small percentage. If you talk to a few salons here and there, then they're going to say, no, we went the institutional way. So if you say, they're a startup, like, yes, the process is starting up, but the institution is not a startup. That's where I have a disagreement. I say the process of doing something cannot itself become an adjective or a noun. It's a verb. So for me, the starting up is a verb. The business. A business can be in its initial stage, can be in its growth stage, can be in its maturity stage, can be somebody that's gotten acquired. Why I think these things are important is because fancy terms sometimes really bucket people unnecessarily, and it closes more doors than opens. Absolutely. A lot of people don't take that into consideration. They think I'm a startup, so it sounds like that, and therefore it's like that. No, you close a lot of doors for yourself when you keep saying I'm a startup.
So that's a good point. So I just want to talk about a little gap that's come in my thinking when you're talking about entrepreneurs and then moving on to making Make in India a successful policy.
Right.
So when you say entrepreneurs, it can be anyone. So it could be kirana store guys, anyone working for themselves.
Right.
And if you look at any figures across the planet, developing countries have much higher rates of entrepreneurship than developed countries.
Absolutely.
So in developed countries, people just tend to go and work for the local company.
True.
But the upside of having a low entrepreneurship rate is that you have economies of scale. So you can have companies that build up and scale up.
Absolutely.
So if you're talking about promoting small businesses, how do we make a manufacturing industry out of a bunch of small businesses?
That's a beautiful. Okay, I love that. That's my favorite area, right? Economics. You know, and you talked about economies of scale, and why a country is called a developing country is not because its GDP is growing at the rate it's growing. It just means that it still has opportunities beyond the normal nomenclature to function in a way which has still not been disrupted or used in other economies. So developed economies have a lot to learn from a developing economy, and India is such. India, if you ask me, is actually been a hub for business for the longest period of time. We are by nature, we like to do something of our own, right? Even if you go to the small towns, you'll be surprised to see that most of them are self-employed, right? Because they do not really have access to the job market. So, and I also don't think it's upon the government to create jobs. It's upon ourselves. And I, from your show, urge the parents to tell your kids, whether you come from a service family or not, the easiest route to a livelihood is not going and working for someone. Is to create a workforce around you.
That's a very
that's
Indian
going to work for
idea
you.
of the marketplace.
Yeah, that's a very Indian idea. And because you said, coming back to that typical point of starting up in manufacturing.
The basic economics.
Basic economics. Manufacturing is not about setting up a factory with thousands of manpower trying to rudimentarily create something. Manufacturing is about harnessing 10 different entities that has one common goal, which means a great fashion unit working with a great plant which has the capacity. So they are not on their own going and creating another manufacturing plant. They are collaborating with you. Working with the workmanships and the craftsmanship, working with the, it can be for textile, a weaver community, getting them included so that the process of sourcing becomes seamless. So it is 5 or 6 different entities coming together to create something is the truest making in India.
Yeah, good.
That's what the China market does. One doesn't replicate the other and create the same thing in silo. One brings 10 others on the same platform to become an enabler.
So that's it's a good point to make, and it goes back to what you were saying about IRA, where you create a platform to people to come on board.
Yeah, absolutely. We have created a platform where we believe we don't have to do anything on our own. There's already people doing it. How do we get them together?
Absolutely.
We wanted to create a Make in India brand and take it internationally by truly empowering the people of India. People who are today not earning anything, give them an opportunity to earn through their creativity. So mapping of skills and creativity is equal to earning. Using the plants which have spare capacity of manufacturing not doing well because they don't have the creativity and the skill for creating fashion now. Their only capacity, or the only skill they have is pure play production and automation of that. So how do we harness that? Instead of making them sick, I think all those people who are in manufacturing, in textile, don't go and create your own plant. Work with the existing plants and bring them up together. They already have the facilities and the machines and the manpower to do it. I don't have to go and look for people to employ as my tailors when I already have ready-made people to do that for me.
Absolutely.
So these tailors now have a better livelihood because people like us are going and giving them an opportunity. All I'm doing is setting up an outlet and selling it to people. My consumer base is ready. And India as a consumer market is the most uprising of all. India as a brand market, which consumes brand, is the highest of all. So, if we are growing as consumers at such a fast pace, then our manufacturing and our ability to contribute back to the economy has to be through culmination of different meeting points.
Absolutely.
So make sure I understand, just give a short thing. So what you're saying is, what NASCOM and what you're trying to do is not build a manufacturing system, is to connect the guys who already know what they're doing to the guys who have the resources, the guys who have the
Beautifully you
plants.
said. So we have a pillar called the Connects pillar.
Yes.
So the product ecosystem, the product council stands on 7 pillars. The first pillar is policy. The most important to ensure you create an ecosystem of wanting to be, that is, you say the sleeping desire, cultivating that to be an active implementation, thought process can only happen when you have flexible policies, which harnesses them, which educates them, and which empowers them. The second thing is connects. If you really want to succeed as a product council, you need to bring people together. You need to connect the right people with the right skill set with those who map to take them at growth at a faster speed. Growth again does not happen you doing it on your own. It has to happen with multiple business working in conjunction with each other.
So what are the problems with creating that ecosystem today? What are the hurdles you're facing?
The biggest hurdles is the people are always there. They're pretty much dispersely placed.
Moving on, I mean, what you mentioned about, these are the structures that are in place in terms of NASSCOM or the product council,
Right.
what it means to do.
Right.
But over the last 1.5 years, I mean, there's a lot of talk and a lot of action which has happened in terms of folks from India going over to Israel and folks
Right.
from Israel coming over to
Sure.
this entire new love affair that is brewing.
Yeah.
You've been to Israel so many times on behalf
Yeah.
of NASSCOM. Now, what I want to understand is three very important things. Our startup economy is still very young compared to the other countries. Even if you look at the countries like Estonia, countries
Right.
like Ireland and Israel, in terms of policies, what do we still need to learn in terms
True.
of the startup policies, not from the government side, from Israel? And second, what's been brewing up in terms of NASSCOM and Israel? What's happening on that front?
Okay, so before I even get into in terms of the policies, what the governments are trying to do, a big thing that we need to understand is that we're never going to be able to replicate Israel, and we shouldn't try to also, because there is a huge. I think nations are built on culture. Israel is about chutzpah and we're about jugaad, and there's nothing to shy away about it, right? We do call our friends home, get to know them before we give business, and there's nothing wrong about it either. While the Israelis are all about get it done now and how, right? So,
but doesn't that make sense, even if you're talking about culture, doesn't that make sense considering how the different set of companies or different kind of companies that are coming up in India? Because you did mention about, you have a startup in India, I need funding, and in the next 8 months you get sold out.
So I'm going to come to that. So the thing is, that's where we need to learn that we can't completely do away with the culture that has been at the very core of us from the very beginning, right? So you can't do away with that. But how do you create an environment of cross-learning and evolve into being better at how you do it? See, it's like, I don't believe the concept of taking away a part and then replacing with the other really works. I believe that you try to evolve what you have and add on top of it. So we have a culture which is already pretty much deeply rooted in us. Then we add on top of it what Israel has. What do they have? 3 things. A very deeply connected government to the innovation environment.
Yes, absolutely.
1. A very deeply connected education system to the innovation environment.
Yeah.
The third thing, they are very clear about what they are building for. They know their markets well before they build, and they know that they're either building to get acquired or scale. 90% of the companies that they build is to get acquired. They have absolutely very clear mandate. And they look towards US as their biggest partners, because the other thing US has is you have a demand, you quickly need a supply, and because you want to scale. So Mobileye, which was acquired by Intel for $15 billion, was actually a very deep tech company that got incubated out of a university. So remember something, their education system is very, very deeply involved in IP creation. Because deep learning and deep tech has a good number of years of incubation times, anywhere between 5 to 7 years.
And everybody forgets the fact that Mobileye had a big role to play in when Tesla was growing up. There's the tech behind it.
Absolutely. There's the tech behind it, and I'm glad you brought it in. So what does it really mean? It means that if your education system is not geared to handle innovation, and the government is not supporting that in a very deep-rooted way, at the very initial stages of when you're about to think differently, and you get an opportunity to apply the differential thinking, and the government believes in it, and the government takes a role of applying it in their environment, and you grow from there. Now, why I said the government first, the government part. Every child in Israel goes to the army. India sends their kids to army out of passion. Israelis send their kids to army on prudence. And that's the fine line. Army is actually the biggest incubator. Army is their finishing school. So your graduation happens out of the army. Your first level of innovation happens out of the army, which tomorrow gets replicated into private corporate sectors. That's what PM Netanyahu said in the first statement he made. He said,
can you explain that a little bit? How does joining the army, even if it's a forced conscription, how does that make you innovative?
I'll tell you why. As a nation, they're constantly fighting for survival. If you meet an Israeli, they're going to always say, I don't know what my tomorrow looks like, so I make today beautiful. I don't live for the tomorrow at all. So if you ever get an opportunity, and I think you should, when you go to the Gaza, when you go to the Gaza Strip and you see the Iron Dome, you will know what fighting for survival means. And survival brings out the best instincts in people for innovation and invention. Because every day when you think what tomorrow is going to look like and a bomb strike can eliminate you, you will build in a way that you never thought was possible. Which brings me to the point which you should always remember. The human mind is only used at 5% capacity when people like you and I. The reason everybody says, your IQ is better than mine is not because you and I are built differently. We all have three things in common. The brain, they're all structured the same way. The production of the chemicals in the brain, same speed. It's the application. Right? So if your IQ is better than, my IQ is better than yours or yours is better than mine, it's purely because how you apply it.
Absolutely.
It's the environment. Is why an auto ricksha's son, like auto rickshaw driver's son, goes on to become an AIMT topper or an IS topper. How do you think that was possible? Where did he get the IQ from? He knew survival. I do not want to live in the same environment I was born in. I have to excel. The need for that becomes so deep and imperative that you automatically start thinking differently. And that's what drives you. So that's what happens in Israel. Everybody there believes if they don't go to support or work for the nation itself may not exist.
Correct. So can you tune that to the fact that because these are about, agreed, our culture is very different
right?
from them.
Yeah.
The innovation still happens in a culture like us, but then if you look at the structural, if you look at the policy making process in Israel in terms of, we want startups to come up from, and then some incredible startups have come out of Israel. You look at security, you look at AI, you look at automation. It's just incredible. It just goes on. But that has been helped by the fact that the government has a pro-startup policy in terms of funding, in terms of giving them the idea, go here, we'll give you the equipment, go here, we'll help you build the
in terms of what you said earlier.
How is that different from India? What does because we also have a policy, we also have a startup policy, but what needs to change in that policy in the longer run?
Absolutely. So when I was coming to things that Netanyahu said, first I said about this government and going to army school as such is because of the pure power of discipline and innovation that brings to the table. Right? You don't just go there to fight warfares, you go there to get prepared for it. So when you go get prepared for it, you're working on the best security ideas. How Checkpoint came out? It came out of a guy who went to army. PM Netanyahu got shot in his arm and the guy has an IQ of 180, he was a topper at Howard. How do you think that happened? Just because he was an Israeli? No! That instinct. He didn't want to just stay where he was, he wanted to excel at everything that he does. So the thing that I was talking about is one, when they started, they're a small nation, right? Everybody has to fight for survival. So everybody goes to the army, as young kids, they get disciplined, there is something called as inculcation of innovative thinking. So depending on the units that they work in, each unit either is working on security, or working on AI, or working on machine learning, because they're preparing for warfare. They're preparing how if something happens, how they predict it. How did Iron Dome come about, right? The entire prediction policy, security, again, they hack into their own system to see the vulnerabilities, then they create machine learning to have automation into it. So what they do is, some of the products get applied in the army, the best of the breed, the others that don't, which has an application in the corporate normal environment, the consumer environment, they go ahead and start building that and making it privatized. You understand how the entire thing works? So they build for the best. So let's say this, they build 10 technologies, out of which 2 can be applied when it comes to the army's needs, because their whole benchmarking thing exists and they decide that this is going to get implemented. The others that they don't but have tremendous possibilities, great ideas, can be applied in a corporate environment, the government funds. Now why does the government fund? It's a small nation. 7 million people. These 7 million people can't be the consumer of everything they build. So what is important? If I have to ensure that as an economy I thrive, because I'm such a small economy, I have to explore marketplaces elsewhere. That cannot happen if I do not have a plethora of products. So the government said for the survival and betterment of my people's living, and by getting this community upper in its scale, because if you really ask me, while we all talk about Hindus being, harassed in terms of the invasions the most, we have been subject to the most amount of issues, the Jews are, in my eyes, they are the most. They have gone through worst. And that country therefore has become thinking like, I need to support my community, whatever is required. So they said for better living, for better investment opportunities, for better economic growth, I need to look for a market outside. So for a GDP, for a 7 million people economy, a $324 billion GDP, can you imagine people to GDP ratio? And we 1.2 billion with a 2 trillion. Just imagine how each one of us are worth and what each one of us worth there. If the government didn't do that, if the government did not invest and create that culture, they wouldn't have been able to survive. For survival, you need money, you need support, and therefore, for you to grow your community, you need to do it elsewhere.
But don't you think it's less of investment and more of policy making? Because investment you can get from anywhere.
No, when I say investment, see, what if the government, what policy will they see? Think about it. What is the role of a policy? The role of a policy is not having 3 lines documented in a piece of paper that sits somewhere.
I'll give you an example of a policy. We didn't have an exit policy in the for startups in India.
True.
So many, the incidents which happened in the last couple of years.
True.
I mean, isn't that something? These are the basic.
Okay, now I'll tell you something. Let's say I have a great exit policy, but my startups that are coming up don't know where to get the money from, because see, when you're building something which is deep tech and deep learning, it requires investment. Who do I go to? A corporate will not give it to me because they still have to see the POC, the proof of concept. Not all deep learning and deep tech, researchers become a proof of concept. So somebody has to take the risk. Who takes the risk? The government does. Institutional investors will not take that risk. Institutional investors would want to see a POC.
But doesn't that talk to the differences between Israel and India?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
No, but the fundamental fact of one, Israel has a lot of backing from the West for obvious reasons, going back to their foundation. But second, because they're a country of 7 million people, it's easier to incubate and invest, rather than a country of 1 billion plus people.
Can I tell you something?
When I was coming to things that Netanyahu said, first I said about this government and going to army school as such, is because of the pure power of discipline and innovation that brings to the table. Right? You don't just go there to fight warfares, you go there to get prepared for it. So when you go get prepared for it, you're working on the best security ideas. How Checkpoint came out? It came out of a guy who went to army. PM Netanyahu got shot in his arm, and the guy has an IQ of 180, he was a topper at Howard. How do you think that happened? Just because he was an Israeli? No! That instinct. He didn't want to just stay where he was, he wanted to excel at everything that he does. So the thing that I was talking about is, one, when they started, they're a small nation, right? Everybody has to fight for survival. So everybody goes to the army, as young kids, they get disciplined, there's something called as inculcation of innovative thinking. So depending on the units that they work in, each unit either is working on security, or working on AI, or working on machine learning, because they're preparing for warfare. They're preparing how, if something happens, how they predict it. How did Iron Dome come about, right? The entire prediction policy, security, again, they hack into their own system to see the vulnerabilities, then they create machine learning to have automation into it. So what they do is, some of the products get applied in the army, the best of the breed, the others that don't, which has a application in the corporate normal environment, the consumer environment, they go ahead and start building that and making it privatized. You understand how the entire thing works? So they build for the best. So let's say this, they build 10 technologies, out of which 2 can be applied when it comes to the army's needs, because their whole benchmarking thing exists, and they decide that this is going to get implemented. The others that they don't, but have tremendous possibilities, great ideas, can be applied in a corporate environment, the government funds. Now why does the government fund? It's a small nation. 7 million people. These 7 million people can't be the consumer of everything they build. So what is important? If I have to ensure that as an economy I thrive, because I'm such a small economy, I have to explore marketplaces elsewhere. That cannot happen if I do not have a plethora of products. So the government said, for the survival and betterment of my people's living, and by getting this community upper in its scale, because if you really ask me, while we all talk about Hindus being, harassed in terms of the invasions the most, we have been subject to the most amount of issues, the Jews are, in my eyes, they are the most. They have gone through worst. And that country therefore has become thinking like, I need to support my community in whatever is required. So they said, for better living, for better investment opportunities, for better economic growth, I need to look for a market outside. So for a GDP, for a 7 million people economy, a $324 billion GDP, can you imagine people to GDP ratio? And we 1.2 billion with a 2 trillion. Just imagine how each one of us are worth and what each one of us worth there. If the government didn't do that, if the government did not invest and create that culture, they wouldn't have been able to survive. For survival, you need money, you need support, and therefore, for you to grow your community, you need to do it elsewhere.
But don't you think it's less of investment and more of policy making? Because investment you can get from anywhere.
No, when I say investment, see, what if the government, what policy would they see? Think about it. What is the role of a policy? The role of a policy is not having 3 lines documented in a piece of paper that sits somewhere.
I'll give you an example of a policy. We didn't have an exit policy in the for startups.
True.
So many the incidents which happened in the last couple of years.
True.
I mean, isn't that something? These are the basic.
Okay, now I'll tell you something. Let's say I have a great exit policy, but my startups that are coming up don't know where to get the money from. Because, see, when you're building something which is deep tech and deep learning, it requires investment. Who do I go to? A corporate will not give it to me because they still have to see the POC, the proof of concept. Not all deep learning and deep tech, researchers become a proof of concept. So somebody has to take the risk. Who takes the risk? The government does. Institutional investors will not take that risk. Institutional investors would want to see a POC.
But doesn't that talk to the differences between Israel and India?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
No, but the fundamental fact of one, Israel has a lot of backing from the West for obvious reasons, going back to their foundation. But second, because they're a country of 7 million people, it's easier to incubate and invest.
Absolutely.
Rather than a country of 1 billion plus people.
Can I tell you something? I want to correct that thinking.
Okay.
Out of the 1.2 billion people that we have, how many today come forward to build something? Right? Do you rather, if you're a 7 million people, you still have, about 100 startups from Israel that come about and get acquired and all of that? There, of course, are in terms of an economy, in terms of a marketplace, we are very big. We have a lot of foreign investments coming in and so on. Now, think about it. The number of people coming forward in India is still a lot lesser than the number of people coming forward in Israel. Because their culture is not a job culture at all. How many companies are there that actually provide jobs there? Their culture itself is a startup culture. So, think, out of that 7 million, 10% of them are coming forward to the government on a regular basis, and the size of the funding, is what? Anywhere between 2 million to 35 million. Yes, minimum size. Small sizes of funding, they don't touch otherwise, because they know the period of incubation is that long. Now in India, we have 1,000 crore startup fund. If you talk about money, the money is already there. Question is, where does it go? How does it go? That is called policy.
We talked about 2018 is going to be different, and we've talked about various issues. I mean, we've crossed borders to Israel, and what we need to learn from Israel in terms of the startup policies and how the army thing happened there and here, in terms of your own personal journey. Now, I want to go back to something very personal, as well as in terms of how the industry looks at these things. Now, over the years of being a journalist, you go to these tech conferences, right? Across. You have a tech conference at yours. I wouldn't name which year this happened, but I was very taken aback when I go to these tech conferences across the world, including India, and especially in the Valley. This happens a lot. You have so many great women entrepreneurs, and what sometimes beats me, the fact that when these great women entrepreneurs are on stage, I still remember, I won't name which event, there is a very famous event. You have these great women entrepreneurs on stage and talking about their life's journey and what is good and what is bad, talking about the VCs one. But they never ask they never ask those great questions, the same serious questions that are asked to the men on the stage. Is that something is one-off?
Wait, can you give an example? What do you mean, like a good question, a bad question?
So it's like I still remember this incident which happened a couple of years ago on this industry forum in India, when this lady entrepreneur was on stage, a couple of lady entrepreneurs and 3 men on the same panel, and the gentleman who was moderating the entire session, he had all these serious questions about VCs, funding and all these things with the men. And when it comes to the lady entrepreneur, this gentleman, I'm guessing he's about 52 or 51 of you, he just talks about what movies does she like or who is your favorite actor. And she's a famous woman entrepreneur in India. 2 questions. You've been an entrepreneur, you've been an investor over the years, and you're at the top echelons of the government right now. Has the scenario changed for women entrepreneurs and women leaders in India specifically? Have you ever faced an issue in terms of, have you heard from women entrepreneurs facing issues like they go to a VC and probably the VC would not look at a woman entrepreneur the same way as he would look at as a man entrepreneur? Has the things changed for women in tech? What things
and business
specifically?
Very true. Firstly, I feel anybody who's putting in money feels they're in control. And they feel it's like a hot seat. It's like how, I'll tell you something very honestly, literacy does not bring education. Education is something which comes through culture, experiences, self-grooming and building acquaintances with those you can learn from. This country is filled with a lot of literates, hardly who are really educated. And degrees don't make that, right? So, coming to the point. Women in tech has been, I think, an over-talk term.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. We all have to agree that there are certain things we are excellent at and certain things which we are still working towards. right? There are a lot of women in the technology domain, great ones, phenomenal ones, but when you look at today the banking ecosystem of India, why do you see only women on top? And why doesn't this question come that women in banking, when will men in banking come? Well, they work. So sometimes it can be like this. I'm a woman entrepreneur who was not a techie, but wanted to build a tech business. So I partnered with those who will help me do that. So I had a vision. My vision was to get the right people on board. I still am a woman in tech. But am I a techie? No, I'm not. Not in the so-called parlance or definitions of tech. But I'm an engineer. Why I say I'm an engineer is because the definition of an engineer is someone who can build something. You engineer something. You create something, you foster something. So I'm an ecosystem engineer. That's what I like to call myself. Anybody who's sitting in this hot seat saying I'm going to invest feels that I have the power and control and whatever I can do, I can get away with. It's funny, but let me tell you something. You see so many of these cases that have come up or surfaced recently from a 500 startups to others. I'm not going to name, but I'm going to tell you. Do you think it's an India problem? No, it's a worldwide problem.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a worldwide
It's a problem of too much of too much of your main hormones getting pumped up, and you feel I'm in control. And if you can't get enough control somewhere else, you want to exert it when you are investing because you believe money is control. Money is not control. Now, does it only happen, was it a one-off case? No, I have myself seen it. And indeed, I've corrected someone saying, stop. But let me also tell you, don't women do that? They do that too. The moment you're on a chair where you feel you have the money to invest, you suddenly start feeling in control and you can get away with anything. My request on this show is that you're not investing because it's a selfless, thankless way of doing a social good. You're investing because you want returns. And you invest methodically. You do your math. You know that out of the 100 you've invested, 10 are going to grow and give you 10x return is why you take the risk. You take the risk, they're also taking the risk of giving out their stake to you, believing that you will be the right partner for them to grow. The role of an investor does not begin with investing only and does not close with investing only. It is a partnership that begins and they want to grow together. So they are a team. A VC is a team member of the startup that they invest in. So I would have liked it if this woman standing on the stage would have said, I don't think this is relevant. Don't just think, because you are the one seeking, the one giving you is in control.
No, but I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if you're on the panel, you
Yeah.
can step up and say, why are you asking me this? You ask them that.
Yeah.
But if you're in a VC meeting where, let's be honest, what you're saying is correct. A VC is a team member.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, you're standing there alone, you've got these VCs sitting in front of a desk, they've got the power in that moment.
Yeah.
So as a woman, is it different? Do you feel less power because of being a woman, because of the situation of sexism in India?
Right.
Or is that something that's a myth?
You know what? No, sexism is not a myth. It exists. It's been, like you said, it's been like a social environment that has been existing, and I believe that has been harnessed by certain segments of the society to, I think, to rather overpower you. Because women were already empowered. I also don't like the word woman empowerment. I'm sorry to say, I may be taking off a lot of feminists. I don't think feminism is really something that goes with business. I think, because have you ever heard a man using the word machoism? Men, when a man doesn't, we don't need to. We already are empowered. When you have the power to give life. To me, I always define a woman is a womb plus a man. You have the power to create and you have the power to procreate. So you are overtly powerful, right? So coming to the point, it's very simple and it's very plain. Sexism exists, gender equality exists, but it's not only the man who does it. It's also the women. Women are equally responsible. And I have seen it. I've experienced it.
So how do we change those mentalities?
So it's by standing up. When do you think, the fight for independence doesn't end on a battlefield. It's an everyday affair. I have literally, met clients, which is where I found it difficult to deal with a woman, but I found it extremely easy to deal with a man. Not because of anything else, it's purely because of play of ego and because they have been overpowered by somebody at their home and therefore they want to undermine you. So it is not just a man or a woman thing. The way we overcome this is by standing up. To all the viewers who are watching, even if it's a guy, I'm telling you, a lot of men face this. More men face this. In a room, When somebody believes they have more power over you, they will try to showcase you. They don't care about gender. Sexism exists. I say the way to eradicate this is don't talk about feminism. You're already empowered. Don't ask for women empowerment. Go and do something. Take a risk. If you lose, you will guide. If you win, you will lead. But take that. And to take that risk, you're not dependent on a man or a woman. You're not. You're dependent on yourself and your theory of belief. We need to change that. So one, change the way you think and you've been conditioned to think. It's not easy. It takes time, which means you need to build a circle of trust. Meet people who can help you, which we don't. Again, community building has to become a big way of fostering the business culture in India. There was the days when, you would go to Calcutta Club and Bangalore Club and they would all get together. That was a community building activity. These clubs existed because of that. We don't have that much. Yeah, there are a lot of small bodies that have come up with it. The Thais, the NASCOM, they're doing it. But it has to be like you are going to take the ownership through this show to have a community session where you want to kind of discuss, talk, understand their problems and find solutions. How beautiful will it be? So if we can do that, we'll make people a lot more confident. Man, woman alike. And sexism is not only for women. It exists with men too.
Absolutely.
I have seen in a room where a woman has gone ahead and undermined two young startup minds because she felt that's the only way to feel good about herself. And I confronted her. I said, why did you do that? She said, no, yeah, these guys need to be put in place. Why? So then she talked about what happened to her. We need to leave that behind. History is just a part of reflection. History should not play a role in your daily action. That is what I believe. We all have history.
Absolutely.
There's always a me too, there was always a he too, there's always a she. All of this exists, yeah. Let us understand, this is everywhere in the world, it's not India alone. All I'm going to say to the young minds that are looking to build the new India, leave your history at home. When you step into the world to build something, think about how you're going to move forward, not what held you back.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
So that was one really insightful conversation from hearing about how to make chocolates well to about women empowerment to sexism, about why Israel plays such an important role and why India is the future for startups. Thank you, Dr. Som, for being on the show, for giving us this time. Until next time, have a great weekend ahead.